Hey everyone, welcome to My Big Story with Christopher Swan. This is the weekly show where I talk with amazing people that are living a life of intention, creating a life that they love and where we can learn from their stories. This week, I have such a smart and interesting conversation with poet and teaching artist Natalie Patterson. Natalie's also the president of the nonprofit Sister Support, an organization committed to the advancement of women through community, connection, and sisterhood. Natalie's well known for her poetry, sharing it publicly since 2002, with many adventures including slam poetry, working with the Poetry Lounge, starring in a very popular SoulPancake series, and being hired by companies like Sephora. She speaks about important ideas and issues like bias, including gender and ethnicity, about culture, body image, empowerment, and she's eager to help us grow to see past our blind spots. But something unique to Natalie, she translates her ideas and poetry into tangible action by leading the nonprofit Sister Support, with programs to empower women and change narratives, and recently an opportunity to help Syrian refugees. This interview is definitely more of a conversation. Not only do we understand more about Natalie's story, we'll learn a lot about what guides her, informs how she shows up in her work, and as a person. I kind of think of our conversation as gaining a new perspective and why change, advocates, and poetry are needed. I absolutely love meeting Natalie, hanging out at the studio, and getting deeper into her intentional thinking. And she's wonderful and so kind. After you listen here, definitely check out her poetry either on her episode page on accidentalinformation.com or on YouTube. Everyone, meet Natalie. Natalie, welcome to the show. It's so good to have you here.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
And well, it's funny, I say good to have you here, but I'm here sitting in your space and this amazing, cool space. And I'm looking at the sign, what will your legacy be? Like, it's just so interesting and positive and creative. So I love your space. You heard this before. I was walking around. So it's great to be here on my show in your space.
Yeah, it's great to be together.
So we talked a few weeks ago and just trying to, get to know each other a little bit. And I was hooked when you just started talking about some of these small things that we should know and just perspectives in the way that we see the world. So I'd like to jump right into how I'm going to frame changing the world. I think of the things that you're doing as you're changing the world in a unique way through art, through awareness. So especially, I think you're known for your poetry, obviously.
Yeah. And
I don't think everybody realizes how poetry can change the world or how the link works. Could you talk a little bit about, for the people that don't know, why does poetry or how can poetry change the world?
So for me, I think the reason I'm drawn to poetry is because it's a bridge, right? So there's so many things in life that are so hard to articulate. Like the feeling and the moment you realize that someone is dead and they're never coming back. Right? That's like that exact moment, that like missing and that longing and that like slight regret or like things that you didn't even realize you were going to miss that you now suddenly are like, I'm never going to taste this thing they made again because no one in the whole world can make this thing. And so I think what poetry offers is a moment to slow down, a moment to feel fully, and to like sink into a moment, to really think about what wind feels like on your skin. Like we typically are moving so quickly that we don't get that opportunity, but poetry really provides that. And I think specifically in these kind of in trying times, that is so necessary because if you're not going to therapy, you need some way to be able to decompress and to like sit with how you feel. And so for me, poetry is exactly that. When I hear someone describe something that I never thought to describe, but was exactly the thing, like exactly the words that I would have never come up with, that's the potential of poetry to me. It's the connecting of hard to describe things in language.
And what do you think the results are from that? What will
my
that
God.
do for somebody?
Well, here's the thing. Like, I write poems about my little self with my little feelings and like whatever. And then like last night I was doing an event and I read a poem about birthing a child, but about birthing, the poem is called Push, and it's about the process of birthing something, right? So I use that as the metaphor to talk about what needs to happen in America. Like, we need to push harder to birth what is coming next. And so I thought I was talking about a female experience of like birthing a child. Like, that is something women who have had children can relate to. And this like 6'5" man walks up to me at the end and he says, I just have to tell you, I was listening to your poetry and I started weeping.
Wow.
And I was just like, okay, thank you. Because like, he was not in my perspective when I was writing this poem. I was thinking about women and myself. And then this 6'5" man walks up talking about he's weeping and had to go to the bathroom to gather himself because he didn't understand that this is how he would feel. So I think that that's the opportunity that's afforded, is like, we can cleanse and become, purified again and start over and connect to things we didn't know we were connected to.
Yeah, that's the key there that I even just heard. And I wonder if he even understood why he was feeling that way, like what it really connected to, or maybe, it's a personal connection or something. He sees the world differently. And that's how I think poetry can also open our eyes. It resonates. And I love that you talked about, like just your little feelings from your little self, but you're not the only one with them. It happens to be your world, but I bet there are like thousands of us that probably had the very same experience.
And that's the thing for me, is I get to see, like, I am a Black girl from Indiana, from a really small town in Indiana, and I say things in rooms of people that I do not think can relate. Like, I'm a plus size Black girl, right? And so there's a lot of rooms that no one else like me is in that room. And somehow people will connect in ways that I can't even completely fathom.
Yeah.
But, after doing this for almost 15 years, obviously I can understand those connections a little bit better. But when I see those kind of magical moments where I'm like, this girl should not even care about what I'm saying, and she is over here crying. Like I do a poem about being fat, and a super skinny girl walks up to me crying, and she's like, "Oh my God," and I'm like, "How?" I know. And it's like, like, my job is not to know how. My job is to do it. Is just to do my job, and all the other stuff is just magic that comes along with my job, and that's the awesome part.
Do you find that you are, maybe that your awareness is opened up even as well? Like when that, like for that example, you're talking about this, maybe this plus size sort of conversation, and the skinny girl comes over and says this stuff, and you're the what, how, what? Does that also bring awareness to you about
Absolutely.
like, maybe this transcends in a different way?
I am informed about myself every single time I write something and step on stage with it. Every single time. I know something more about myself, but also about humanity, about the world. And so it's interesting because I feel like I have learned things that I traditionally shouldn't have been able to learn.
Yeah.
It's not a linear path, but there are still things that I know as fact because I've lived them, which puts me in a really unique position in society because I'm informed about so many things versus other people who have done one kind of career for their whole life and they're like an expert in this thing but can't correlate it to anything else. I feel like my job is very much being a bridge, and so I'm a connection to so many things. And then also being a poet, I'm a translator, so I'm translating emotion into language, which most people don't have that job either. So it's kind of like having 100 jobs in one, which makes it really interesting because I can walk into any room and I'm like making correlations and I'm like interested in looking at things that some people would go into a party and be like, ugh, this is boring. And I'm like, there's a poem here.
You seem to be like this lifelong learner, like this inquisitive, because you kind of have to be, because if you're getting on stage, you're there and like this connection to something that you didn't even know that somebody would connect to, you're also then having to learn about why that even connects. And so I would imagine you have to be this like, super inquisitive. Why do things work the way they work, and uncovering the mystery behind the everyday? Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to be a detective.
Really?
I mean, like, I think that was like my inherent, like, I'm, most people would just be like, you're nosy, but At least like I grew up and my mom was like, whew, you got super eyes and super ears. You hear everything, you see it, you don't miss anything. So I kind of grew up, I guess I was really, really inquisitive.
Yeah.
But it also turned into me being like, but why?
Yeah.
What's the connection behind this? How come they think that? Or how come they're doing this? And, you know, I had a million questions. So yes, I was absolutely inquisitive. And then turned that into an art.
Yeah. I think it's important. I brought it up because I thought it was important to even realize that asking the why is important for many reasons. And it helps even people that seem from the outside in, when I look at you, I think super informed. And wow, you come with such great information or awareness or ways to look at something, but you're still this super inquisitive person. And that's kind of how you kind of get there as well. So it's like, hey, this is a great trait to have.
Absolutely. You have to ask why. If you're not asking why about like every single thing, and you're not digging and going, but why, specifically about self-work, you're never going to have the answer.
I also want to talk about the topics that you touch on online. If we look online with some of your videos that are very popular, and you and I chatted about this a few weeks ago, that they're only a part of the topics that you want to touch on or things that we maybe need to talk more about. Those are important topics, of course. But what are some of the bigger topics that maybe that you do want to touch on that we're not talking about in the public as much? Maybe you can even set the stage about, okay, this is what I'm hired for, or this is here's the baseline of what we're comfortable with. But this is where I think we need to go.
Yeah. So I'm really often I was on a web series for SoulPancake that did extremely well, and then everyone was trying to hire me to do body image and empowerment. Sephora reached out to me and I did some work for them. Like all of these companies and interesting people, and they were all amazing experiences. But it's only one part of the work. Like, yes, we all need to feel good about ourselves.
Yeah.
But also, some of us are fundamental liars. And some of us fundamentally don't support humanity. Some of us have blind spots. Some of us need to like relook at the way that we communicate. Like there's all these other things that we need to be looking at societally to grow and heal and rectify. I'm never hired for those things. Now people will invite me to do poems about those things, but they don't come with paychecks. And so that is a real fundamental breakdown for me, that there's a value for talking about body image, but we don't want to talk about eating disorders, right? We don't want to talk about the billions of dollars that are made off of making people insecure and then selling them a product so that they don't feel as insecure, right? We don't want to talk about that stuff. We don't want to have any accountability. We don't want to have corporate accountability. And all of those things are fundamental issues, this lack of transparency and this like, cash is king idea that America has become more and more and more, but we don't want to own that that's how we feel. Like we don't just walk around like, money over everything. No one says that.
Yeah.
But if somebody's like, I'll give you $1 million to kill someone else, people are like, they've seen Saw, you know what I mean? Like we go see these movies, we participate in these kind of ideas, but don't want to own that maybe that's part of who we are. And I think that level of deception and dishonesty is really interesting.
It almost seems like it's scary for people.
Oh, totally.
Maybe I'm projecting, but it's like the...
No. I think that's like a fact. I'm not a doctor, but I feel like that's a fact.
Yeah, because if I actually had to really look at why I'm participating in something, some things are very easy for me to look at stuff I'm not going to participate in. It's very black and white. Like I love that you just like mentioned like Saw.
Yeah.
Because I know I'm not going to watch that because it just freaks me out. I think it's really sick that we actually watch this stuff. Now, here's the funny thing, this fundamental thing that I have, because with my partner who adores horror films, and is like the nicest person you'd ever meet, and takes care of people medically.
Yeah, like which is why that's being expressed in that way, so that you don't kill people. Like I get the irony of it.
Yeah.
But I think that's why we have to talk about it, so we know where things are coming from.
Yeah.
Like I just saw the movie Get Out, and and so that's interesting. The filmmaker says like you need to watch it in a crowded theater, right? And that's because there's a commentary about why white people are laughing at stuff that's not funny to the black people in the film. Like we need to talk about that, and so where are the spaces to talk about racism, to talk about gender issues, to talk about trans inequality. Like, where are the spaces that we're talking about that? And so for me, my poetry is where I do that. And I'm always trying to partner with people who are brave enough to put money behind those things. Like, we put $10 million, $50 million, $100 million behind movies where Channing Tatum is taking his clothes off. And that's cool, right? Like, that's interesting and entertainment,
Sure.
but also where is the value in that beyond the money? And so if we're not producing and creating things like that and putting money, substantial money behind things like that, you know, welcome to Trump America. You know, like, really, like, to me, I go, like, there's the correlation is like, these are our values, whether we want to acknowledge that or not. Somewhere in us, this is our value.
Do you feel like things have started to evolve or change in a progressive, good way in some areas? I think about, like, Get Out, like that movie right now. I don't think 20 years ago that would have been made.
No.
And to think about it, that it's made today, it's interesting. I was just listening to the interview with the director about the movie and kind of what he coined it as, and you know, like, because it's getting coined by others as a horror film, but it's actually not.
Yeah, it's like not a horror film at all.
I think he coins it as a social thriller.
Yes.
And I thought, oh, that's smart, because that's why it is. So thinking about that sort of film or some of the other things that are happening in the world, no, it's clearly not perfect, and we have so much more that we need to do. And I think you're right about even acknowledging that we have stuff to do. But where do you think we're going today, or where we're at today with talking about these topics?
I think there's kind of a split. I think that there are people who are investing, like, I think of Netflix as a company. They are putting a lot of money in really solid people creating things and also giving people platforms who otherwise wouldn't have them. Like, I think of all these comedians that I have never really heard of, and then they have, like, Netflix specials. And I'm like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Where's the poetry special, though? You know, but I'm like, but that's awesome, because those people, I don't know if they're, like, selling out arenas. I don't know if that's even possible, but I think technology is giving more people platforms that are deserving of them.
Sure.
You know, and I think about how much money they're going to people like Ava DuVernay and being like, hey, make us 5 films. We'll give you a budget and make whatever you want to. So I think in that way, there's this really awesome potential. But I think we still have fundamental breakdowns. Like, America has racial issues that we don't want to talk about.
No, absolutely.
So, like, that's a problem. Like, that we can't just keep moving forward and just being like, maybe we're just not racist anymore. Like, no.
No, it's still there.
It's still in your heart. So we got to figure that out.
Well, I want to go back a little bit to even where some of this maybe started. So I want to go back early in your career when you first started poetry.
Lord.
And I think it was around 2002 or so that you started to move forward and started doing poetry publicly.
Yeah.
Like more on stage and with groups. And you have this whole long story of like... Because when I was researching you, I was like, wow, you've been doing this for a long time, and you've had this like evolution of where you were doing it, how you were doing it, who you were doing it with.
Yeah.
And like, I think your topics probably evolved. I'd love to know a little bit about what's the beginning? Like, what was maybe the catalyst to get you started to say, hey, I have ideas that I should share out loud?
Well, so it never begins with like, hey, I should do this. It starts with like, I think I have to. Right? Like, I went on a date to this place called the Poetry Lounge, which is the nation's largest poetry venue. It is in Los Angeles. If you haven't been, you definitely should go. And I went there on a date with a random person who I don't even remember this man's name, but he changed the course of my life. And so I feel awful, but he smelled like old car parts. So like, it wasn't a match, but he brought me to the next place in my life.
Yeah.
And I honor and thank him for that wherever he is. And so I went, and it's a 100-seat theater, and there are like 300 people jammed into this 100-seat theater every single Tuesday night. And I was just like, I am not going to leave till I know all the secrets here. Like, I just need to know what this is. And so that's really how it started. I had always written as a kid, but like just as a journal, didn't take it seriously, didn't ever know that you could actually be a poet. Like, I knew that there were poets, but I thought they were all dead except Maya Angelou, you know? Like, at the time, I was like, great, yeah, there's people who like write. I don't know what that means. And a lot of us don't know what like a poet does or what their job is. Like, we're like, you're a poet? What does that mean?
It's absolutely true, because I think when you think about the arts, what visual arts are when it
Yeah.
comes into painting or sketching and entertainment, obviously with acting and things like that. But yeah, where's the poetry special, right? So
yeah, people are like, we don't know what that means.
yeah, we don't really know. And because to me, it can sometimes think about either, it's one of two things. That's what I think. It's some old school, I'm going to write it down. And it's
with your like typewriter, like, tick,
yeah, totally. Or it's some like old, I say old now because I think it's like a little dated. It's like some slam poetry special on HBO or something. I'm like, so it's one of those two things,
Yeah.
right? But I don't think that's it at all. And so that's
No.
what you were kind of tapping into, like, it's a new world.
yeah, it's a new world and the way we express is different. And so what I was doing in 2002 when I first started with just like going to the open mic and just being there and standing on stage shaking with my paper, to then joining a slam team and then doing a national tour, and doing the whole college circuit, and then learning that I wanted to teach. And so I would like take over high schools when I was in a college town, go to a high school and just be like, hey, I'm a poet. I'm doing a poem at Wake Forest tonight. Can we like go into your English classes? And they were like, yes, please go in there. And then we changed the whole energy of the school. Mm-hmm. And then, so there was a whole bunch of things that like informed who I've become as an artist. And I think that's what has to happen is there's a process. Like you have to be terrible. You have to like forget your poem on stage, and like you have to do all the things to then be able to make choices and know why you're doing what you're doing.
So when you started and you had that turning moment in getting on stage, I love that you said that, by the way, that you're on stage, nervous, shaking with the paper.
Honey, my knee was shaking in a place I didn't even know could shake. I was like, I want to fall through this floor. Like I was telling my mom just the other day, I was like, I got halfway through the poem and I was like, I don't even want to finish. The poem is too long and I am done. And how do I get out of here? And if I just run out, people are going to think I'm psychotic. Can the floor open up? Can I levitate out of here? Like, I was like, I need magic powers now because this is done. And I couldn't stop shaking. And I was like, so I sat down. And when I sat down, I asked my friend, did they clap? And she's like, they're still clapping. Like, what are you talking about?
I love that you say that because you've been doing it for so long. And I think people that are just learning about you or have been watching you with like maybe your current work, like you're on, like it's like what you're doing. And I think a lot of us forget that we all start from somewhere.
We all start.
And we all have those nerves where we all are maybe insecure about it, or do I know what I'm doing? And that I know that moment you're talking about where it's like a fog.
Oh,
Wait,
you can't.
They're
You're like,
clapping?
I don't even hear.
Did I
can't
perform?
Like literally, I couldn't remember how I got from the stage to my seat.
Yeah.
I was like, how did that happen? Like
That still happens to me a little.
it's like your body just will take you there, and some of it is I went through a whole year of like practicing surrendering to just what was happening, just going, okay, if this is happening, this is what's supposed to happen. If I'm in this space, I'm supposed to be here. If I'm not in this room, I'm not supposed to be there, and just like accepting what was happening, which I think really often we're like resisting and trying to force things to happen, and you're messing up your experience. Like you're making it harder because you're not willing to just sit with it and go, I'm enough and I'm here, and so I'm going to do the best I can, and that's it. Like what I'm offering is all I have to offer. So if that's not enough for you, I'm sorry. But that doesn't make me less of a person. That just means this moment wasn't a great pairing.
Sure.
So I'll go put myself in other moments that are great pairings. You know what I mean? Like there's just this point that you have to get to in terms of like self-acceptance. And I think that's what you're alluding to when you're like, you're so on. And I'm like, yeah. And last night, right before the show, I was like totally fine. And then as I got there, I got this overwhelming sense of like nervousness and being really dry in the mouth. And I was like, what is this about? And it was because I had a brand new poem that had never been on stage that I had written hours before. And so I was like, so this is new and I have no idea what's going to happen. It's different when I go on stage with a poem that I'm like, this poem kills every time versus something new. It's like, is this going to kill or am I going to die right now? You know, like that's the thing that I was thinking about of like, maybe this is not the right poem until I was doing it. And I was like, oh, this is absolutely the right poem, honey.
Do you enjoy those moments, that little bit of nervousness? Like, does that keep it alive a little bit?
No, I hate those. Honey, no.
Well, some people really do, and that's why I ask, because I think that some people like the fire, like it keeps it fresh. I'm not one that likes it. I'm like, no. I need the nerves to go away because I want to rock with what I'm doing. Because You know what? I've described this to others that have asked me. It's not that I want to be amazing. I want what I'm doing to be amazing.
Absolutely.
For the people that are participating to get something out of it. I don't care if they're like, you're amazing, Christopher, like whatever, but like that content was amazing.
But I think that's the difference between somebody who's trying to curate an experience versus somebody who's trying to be a star, right?
Yeah.
So like the star of a moment doesn't necessarily care about anything except their moment. Someone who's curating an experience wants to be a piece in something that's moving. And to me, that's so much more fulfilling. And I think the way that expresses in my work is, you know, being able to be a part of Sister Support and run this nonprofit organization and like be a part of all of these moving pieces and have a hand in everything.
Yeah.
And then also being on stage for an hour and it's my moment. So I get to do both. But I also know that I'm not interested in being Beyonce. That is too exhausting, and honey, that's too much hair, and like I need a nap sometimes, and I don't know if Beyonce takes naps, and I like them, so I kind of want to do both.
Yeah, that makes sense. I also want to go back to a point that you made earlier about this, like surrender to the moment, because what I thought was interesting about that, it was like you went full circle, talking about the poetry, because you're helping us to remember. Or helping us to connect to something that we didn't even know that we could connect to with words that we didn't have. And it was, again, being in the moment. So it almost sounds like that's what everything you're doing is, even for yourself. It's about being aware, being in the moment of ourself. Is that on? Am I on to something like that?
Absolutely. That's the whole... I created this event called Full Circle. So it's funny that you're like, it's almost like you went full circle. And I'm like, yes, that's what I want everyone to do always. Wow. Is like, go through the process. Like, don't be like, yes, have a goal. Absolutely have a goal. But don't be so focused on the goal that you miss everything that happens on the way to the goal. Like, that's a part of it. And if you don't get those small nuggets, when you get to the goal, it's going to feel empty because you just went for the goal. Like, no, you have to train and you have to be observant and you have to adjust. You have to do all of those things so that when you finally get to where you want to be, you can go, yes, this is awesome and I deserve it because I worked hard. And now I want to create this opportunity for other people. Like, that's what fully living is. Like, that moment when you get to stand in a room or wherever and you go like, I am so proud of myself. And no one can tell me I didn't do a good job because I know I did. I did everything I could absolutely do. And now it's over and I get to start something else. Like, that moment to me is what I'm always living for. And I know that I have to go through the entire process to get there.
It's true. I love that. Going through the process, you know, shortcuts are good for some things, but not for things that you want to learn.
Also, like, shortcuts. No, I don't know when they're good, really. Like, except with Waze. But even Waze is like, they're like, go over the bridge and take the canoe. And like, sometimes you're not trying to do all that.
No, that is true. I think shortcuts work out when I say things like, oh, I already know that process. I don't want to, I don't want to edit this podcast. I'm going to have somebody else do it. This is a shortcut for me.
But that's not a shortcut. That's using your resources. You know what I mean? I think
that's
shortcut is cheating a little bit. It's not, you don't want to do all the work. And you're not willing to like delegate. Delegating is a smart thing to do. Like, if you're not good at something, find the person who is. Like, stop trying to do everything and then you suck at half of the stuff you're doing.
Totally agree.
Because now you look bad and people are like, well, you're halfway dope. Like, I don't want, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not interested in that experience.
That's my bumper sticker, right?
Yeah. I'm half awesome. Like, no one is trying to walk around with that.
Hey, you brought up the full circle. I'd love to hear a little bit more. So let's talk about that, and then I want to dive into sister support as well. So let's start with the program.
Yeah. So full circle. I was having a conversation with one of my best friends from college, and I realized she's this phenomenal singer that no one will probably ever know. And I think that that's unfortunate because I think the thing that we're the best at that we would do for free is the thing we should do for a living.
I agree.
And so I was like, how do I inspire her? Because she's not listening to what I'm saying. Which is like a common thing is like, if I find a problem in the world and no one is listening to me, I try to create an experience for people to experience so that they'll still hear me. Cause I'm like, no, this is important and you missed it. So now I have to trick you in another way because you still need to get this. Like we still need to have this experience, but like you don't hear me though. And so I created Full Circle after having a conversation with her, and it's inviting one seemingly ordinary person to answer 15 of life's biggest questions before an all-female audience is the premise. And so I essentially interview a person, and I hand select the person, and I pre-interview them to kind of get stories of their life.
Sure.
And they have to answer all the questions in story form. And so what I experience as being a woman is we're always doing multiple things at one time. Mm-hmm. It's the most rare experience of my life to go somewhere and sit down and do nothing. Like I'm always fixing, tending, talking to someone, making someone feel better. Like I'm doing all the things, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think about that when I talk to my male friends or lovers or whatever, that's not their experience. Like when I tell, like, oh, went to this party and I brought a wine and then I cut the cheese and then I brought the platter out and then I did dishes they're like, what? Why'd you go? Because you're like working. And so I think about gender a lot, and I think about how the genders are impacted by the way society views them or whatever. And so I wanted to offer women the experience to listen and just be with. Like just get someone's stories and take whatever you want from the experience. Like I'm gonna bring you a high quality person that has jewels to give you. Mm-hmm. Take whatever you want. And I think that that's very much what a podcast, like I think that this is exactly what you're doing is like, I'm going to give you someone that I think is great, and then you take whatever you want from them and make your life better. Like that's your job. And so, instead of being on the freeway doing that experience, I wanted people to, number one, be together, to see other people having light bulb moments, to like watch someone who you thought might have been socially awkward when they walked in, kind of settle in their seat by the end and go like, you see them go, okay. I'm with this. Yeah. Or like, I need to adjust this thing or whatever. And then the audience gets to put questions in the hat at the end. And then I pick out 3 to 5 questions. And so there's a little bit of follow-up or a little bit digging deeper. And so they've been extraordinarily successful and interesting. And I'm now toying with the idea of making them an open space for anyone to come. But the work of Sister Support is very geared towards making environments for women.
Sure.
Like specifically, not that men are not included, but that we have to change the context of the way men participate with women so that women are safe to thrive, really.
Yep. Well, let's talk about that. Yeah, tell me a little bit about Sister Support, a little bit about what the organization is and who founded it and how you participate.
Yeah, so Dr. Kathleen Hartford out of Pittsburgh is this incredible self-made woman. She's a chiropractor and just like all around really, she's just the kind of person who hears the call to action and will always step up. But like in the most effort, like I'm like getting chills thinking about her because like I probably don't tell her often enough how incredible I really think she is and how much of an impact that she's made on my life, because she's not the kind of person that is in it for that. Mm-hmm. So like she kind of gets awkward if you try to like have a moment where you're like, no, you really changed my life. Like she's not here for that. Yeah. She's here to do the work. And yes, she'll be like, you're welcome. Thank you. Moving on. But I met her like about 5 years ago, and she was really impressed with all the things that I was doing and said, how are you doing all of this? Like, who's funding you, or do you have a grant? Like, what's happening? And I was like, oh, no, just
I'm just hanging out here doing it myself.
Just my college checks split up and not paying some of the more important bills so I can get this art show, or so I can do this, or paying Peter, just doing whatever I had to do to be able to do art full time. And she was like, well, like, what's your dream? And I was like, I need space. Because I have this incredible workshop about vulnerability and integrity, and I'm always asking people permission to use their space to do something that I feel like was divinely put in me. Like, I'm really clear about the things that I am skilled at and inherently skilled at. Like, I dropped out of college to be a poet and then have managed to be a poet for the last 15 years. So my mom was very concerned. I assure you, those of you who are parents are like, I hope my child never does that. Sometimes it works out. Not always, but sometimes. And so Kathy said to me, well, let's get a space. like in conversation in that moment, just that quickly. Like we were walking down the street in Santa Monica and I'm like, my dream is space. I might be a painter, but I've never had walls to paint on. And I might be a dancer. And she was like, great, I'm into it. Let's get a space. And I was like, hold up, what is Let's? Who is Let's? Because the way my account is set up, Let's can't get a building. Like I'm not. I would love to be in that position, but
that's not happening.
It's not happening right now. And she was like, no, I'll fund it for a year. And then you just continue to create the programming you're doing and do it for sister support. And I was like, yeah, like, okay, I'm going to start looking on Craigslist today, actually. And so we found this incredible space that we're actually sitting in. And so that was kind of the beginning of my participation with sister support. It existed in Pittsburgh in an incarnation for many years. And the whole point was that she realized there were so many things that she wanted to do that she wouldn't be able to do because there's not a network of support set up for women generally. The first year we kind of like fumbled trying to figure out what it meant. We were like, like sometimes you want your dream and then you get it and you're not sure what to do with it once you get it.
Well, isn't it also, you just kind of feel your way a little bit? Like what's going to work, what's not, how much can we do? Because if you try to be everything to all women, maybe won't make a dent.
Yeah, so we don't try to be everything to all women. We try to be who we are to the women we meet, right? So I have no intention of this being like a global nonprofit that's going in every country. Like, no, that's not scalable for me. Like, I don't want to run a nonprofit for the rest of my life. And there are people who want to do that. And for those people, I hope that we find them and I hope that we can continue to scale it. But I know that it will change hands over the years, as it should. Like, my perspective is mine. It's not going to meet the need of every woman.
Sure.
And so I want to afford that opportunity to every woman, which means we have to be innovative and constantly bringing in fresh people and fresh eyes and fresh thoughts.
What's your connection with working within this organization and then your poetry life? Like, because I think they're clearly connected, but how do you stay in this space of empowering women, this fundraising piece, all of this stuff that goes in with a nonprofit and providing space, but also, create this awareness for people within your art? Like, what's your role here and how do you blend them all together?
Well, officially my title, I'm the president of Sister Support. And I think that, to me, there really is no separation. This is the full expression of the ideas of my poetry. It's my poetry manifested in physical space.
I love that.
And so for most people, they're like, so you run a nonprofit and you're a poet. And I'm like, It's the same thing. It's like the end of the sentence. Like, yes, I started as a poet doing things for myself. And now I do things for other people with the same messages and with the same ideas that are in my poetry. Now I just get to produce an event. I get to curate an experience. I get to develop mentor programs. Like, it's the same exact thing. It's going, we all have to help each other. We all need to be thinking these kind of ideas.
I love that you didn't separate I'm the president here and I do art over here. Because when you do your art, really, you're talking about the message and the reason you're doing it. And you're just manifesting that in any way that makes sense to you that helps others.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's really transferable to anybody, actually. Because I think sometimes we get stuck in the how versus the why. Remember the why, what you're doing, and the how could be different ways.
My job is not how. My job is that. I don't worry about how.
Yeah.
I just have a dream and know that if I do what I am supposed to do, if I stay true to myself, it will all align. My life is a testament to that.
What is we started earlier with, the poetry and how that changes the world or how that does what it, brings that awareness. But you just mentioned like the why. Is there, in different words, the why, like why or what you're trying to do?
I don't know that I know that answer. I don't know that I'm supposed to know that answer. I know that I am the only me to ever exist. And I know that there's something special about that. And I know that there's no one else who has my thoughts the way that I have them and my expression the way that I express. And so if nothing else, I offer that. If I have nothing else, which I have not, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know what else you have if you have more than your voice and your thoughts and your experiences. What else? Like, your money, guess what? The IRS can come and take it. You know what I mean? So, like, what else do you actually own, right? You don't own anything but your soul and your thoughts. That's it. And so that's what I have to give. And so I will. As long as that makes sense and it feels right in my gut, in my intuition, I'll show up.
I think that's something that everybody can do as well. It's so simple.
Oh yeah, that's the whole point of life. Do your thing. Mm-hmm. Just do it. When it doesn't feel right, don't do it.
I love that part, especially that. When it doesn't feel right, don't do it.
Don't keep doing something even though you're like, oh, this feels gross.
I think we forget that.
Well, here's the thing. We compromise. Because we do things, we get ahead of ourselves. And I think about this a lot. I'm not married and I have no children. That is on purpose. You know why? Because when you make a commitment to someone else, you don't have the luxury of going, I changed my mind. When you have a kid, that's a lifetime commitment. And so if you screwed up, if you were like, I'll just we'll figure it out. No, you won't. You'll be behind the 8 ball for the rest of your life. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to be on struggle status and you're going to have to do things that are desperate because now you have other people to think about. And so I watched my mom make those choices. I watched my mom be a single mom and struggle and not find love because she was trying to be a good example and trying to work in all of these things. And I've watched the way it's stolen her joy and it's stolen part of what makes her uniquely beautiful and amazing and wonderful. She doesn't see it anymore. And so watching that and watching other people, like, you know, we can look around in society and watch people who never came fully alive. We also can identify people who did. And there is a distinct difference in the way that they live, breathe, everything. And so I wanted to be the person who was thriving. I wanted to be the person that was alive. And even if that didn't work out, cool. It's like shoot for the moon, at least you end up among the stars. And like, that's really the philosophy that I live with is like, I'm going to try to go big and like, no, am I going to hit it every single time? No, but I'm also not willing to be miserable.
Sure. And that's not the point to hit it big every time either,
No,
right?
It's absolutely not. Like if I hit it big every time, I'd be like, okay, now what? Like, and we look at these celebrities who have everything and they are depressed. We look at Robin Williams who had everything and still kills himself because he didn't have everything, even if that was our perception. And so I think about trying to be whole on the inside a lot, and trusting my instinct is a humongous part of that. Is when something feels gross to me, I have to graciously say, no, thank you.
What holds you back?
Like in life, what holds me back?
Yeah, like what gets in your way? Because it sounds to me, though, you're very aware and you are in the moment and you do know where you want to go. Even if you don't know the end game of the trajectory, you know that you're on a trajectory.
Absolutely. But
are there things for you that hold you back?
Absolutely. I mean, I think social constructs weigh a lot. So my experience is I'm a Black woman in America, right? And so no, that's not like 1913. And in 25 years, people will be like, I can't believe you lived through 2017, right? That was so crazy. And so I think about the limitations that society puts on me, and not that I'm going to be stopped by those, but they definitely are things that get in the way. Like I just did a show last night and I was the only woman on the show. 6 male comedians and me. And so I think about, is that an environment that I feel completely safe in? No. Is that an environment where I feel completely listened to? No. And those are often my experiences where I'm the only Black person in a room, or, and there's a lot of amazing communities that I'm a part of, but I'm the only Black one there. And representation impacts the way that you participate. We know that.
Yep.
If you can't see it, you can't be it. And so while I find it a privilege to be in those rooms for other Black people who aren't in the room, I also realize I'm a fair-skinned Black woman with green eyes and curly hair. And so is that really representation? Like the passable Black person, the palatable Black person that you found? Like, I'm the inspirational poet, right? You're not picking the poet who's going to be like, I don't care. I'm going to just say what I want to say. You're picking the person who you know is safe, right? And so what does that mean? And what does that say about us? And so like, while I'm grateful for the things that I have, I think about those intersections a lot and what is my responsibility in those rooms. And so I'm going to talk about the stuff that's hard to talk about. I'm going to, after the show, follow up and be like, hey, so just for future reference, it's really important that you think about these things. I had an experience of a friend inviting me to do a photo shoot. And he's a white pastor in LA, and he has, a nonprofit, and he's doing really incredible work. And he asked me to be one of the faces of the product launch that they were doing. And I was like, oh, wow, that's really progressive. Like, you're having a plus size woman wearing your shirts and and you're incorporating people of color, and that's limited in your community. So this is great that you're putting that platform and making that visible. Except when I got to the photo shoot, the makeup artist didn't know how to do makeup for Black people. The hair person didn't know how to do hair for Black people. And then they were like, ooh, the plus size clothes didn't come in. So can you just hold this cup? And so how then do I not feel like a prop? How am I supposed to have an experience that I feel looked after and thought of when everyone else, all the other models had that opportunity to be treated fairly and decently? And I'm just supposed to get over it. And so I think the things that hold me back are this struggle between being a person who sometimes knows what is right and knows when things are not fair, but always having to be the person who talks about it because other people are not being brave enough to call stuff out. And so that is tiring to be the person who's like, hey, stop being racist. Hey, that's sexist. Hey, that's homophobic and it's not cool. That is exhausting.
Yeah.
And I think that that's easily alleviated if more of us are brave and more of us are paying attention. And if we just go like, hey, that's not okay. It's as simple as hearing something or witnessing something and being willing to step up.
Yep.
That really creates an environment for everybody to be safe. It's like if anybody is being oppressed, we all are on some level. And so if we are disconnected from that, that is highly problematic to us growing and developing and being better individually, but also holistically.
Absolutely. I like that you actually shared that, if one of us if there's bias for one of us, that it's probably for the rest of us. And I think that's the truth with we're disconnected.
Completely.
Because it's only about my experience a lot of the time versus actually all of this stuff is everywhere and people have different experiences, but you got to look at that as a clue. It's like a clue to actually what else is really happening. That I feel like the theme is awareness here because it makes me, I'm like, oh yeah, well, if I can open my eyes a little bit bigger to say, oh, well, if my experience is this, maybe it's even different or something else is going on somewhere else.
And just being aware of what is my experience and then going, are other people having the same experience?
Right.
Looking around, observing, and then asking people and going, hey, opposite person of me, complete opposite life experience. Are you having this experience? And then they're like, oh no, I'm not. That's not what I am feeling at all.
Yeah.
And then use your ability to leverage your privilege on someone else's behalf. Like it costs me nothing to be in a room and be like, how come there's no Muslim people on these panels ever? How come the most diversity in these rooms are Asian people? Like you have the one Asian guy. How come Asian people have to always be funny or smart? How come the fat person has to always be funny? Why can't they be serious? Why can't they be the love interest? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Why aren't these things happening? And so to me, I have to be aware of that. I have to be aware of who's underrepresented. And then I have to be willing to speak about it. And so, yes, that's completely exhausting, but it's also like, that's the work.
Right. That's why.
And if I want someone to speak on my behalf, I have to be willing to speak up on someone else's.
Absolutely.
Like when I'm being mistreated, I want someone to step up and go, that is unacceptable on her behalf. I don't want to have to always defend myself. And so when we're in community, when we're in brother and sisterhood, there's the opportunity for that.
Do you have any advice for anybody else out there that needs to remember to find the magic or how to do it?
You have to look for it. It is everywhere. you are not looking. Sometimes we're looking down, like metaphorically. Our posture is down. Well, honey, you can't see the sky looking down. Like chin up. Like get up and go out into the world and find an adventure. Find someone to help. Be of service. Like to me, I always know, the thing I always do if I'm starting to feel depressed or like starting to feel down or like, depressed might be a little bit strong, but if I'm just like not feeling like myself, I go take a walk. Because I know I'm going to see something in this world that is going to move me. I'm going to see someone who's in a worse position than me and be like, let me count these blessings, honey, because I have a place to live. I'm not living on the street. Like just inherently those kind of things. You realize I have a car that I get to drive. The thing I've started doing now is I say what I get to do. Like I get to do this. I met this woman a couple weeks ago and she was like, yeah, we get to do this work and blah, blah, blah. And she was talking about eating disorder, like helping people with eating disorders. And she was like, I get to do this work. And I was thinking, you just listen to people's problems all day. And you're looking at that like it's a privilege.
Absolutely. I never thought of it that way.
And I literally was like, if I just start saying I get to do this, everything seems like a gift. And if everything seemed like a gift, I would cherish it.
Yeah.
And the way I would walk in it would be different. And so now I'm thinking about my life and the things that I'm doing, even things I don't necessarily want to do. I'm trying to find the silver lining and go, I get to do this. Like even last night with this show that I was not pleased with the way that it was produced, I was like, I get to show up for this woman and celebrate her, regardless of what anybody else is doing in the room. I get to share this poem I wrote for her with her.
I think that's one of my favorite things that you shared today. I'm Mr. Silver Lining. Glass is always half full.
Yeah.
But that's different than what you just described. It's different. It's the I get to do this that's powerful.
And it's a privilege, like really.
That's what it means.
This is a privilege. Like every moment we get, even when it's awful.
Yeah.
There were people that died this morning. They do not get to do anything else.
Yeah.
And even our suffering becomes a privilege sometimes when you think of it juxtaposed to dying. Like, it's like I think about, I've been thinking about body image a lot recently. I was dating someone who I perceived to have an eating disorder. And I realized why that wouldn't work for me was because it made me self-conscious about something I am not self-conscious about. I get to have this body, whatever it looks like today. I have a body that fully functions. That if any part of my body did not work, that would be a different life situation for me. And so like, I get to wear this body. So shouldn't I represent it the best way I can? So yes, honey, I probably have a crop top on this summer. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I'm probably going to live differently if I think of it like a gift.
Sure.
And so that's really what I invite people to do is get to do something.
Okay, let's talk about what's next. Because we talked about this a little bit earlier. You have some really interesting things coming up in May.
Yeah.
So what's next for you in Sister Support?
So I met this man, Elias Matar, who is a filmmaker and has spent a lot of time in Lebanon helping Syrian refugees over the last 3-4 years. And he shared, I went to a community dinner, a refugee community dinner, and, like a lot of people, this Syrian refugee conversation is like, we're watching people die, and our governments are conflicted, and people have a heart for refugees, but we don't know what to do, and there's all this red tape and whatever. And so I went to this dinner and met these 2 Syrian families, and I was like, I need to do all the things. What do we do? And so this man shared with us, everybody had to bring something. So you brought a food item or another thing to share with the group about what home is for you. And so he brought this box. And it's this gorgeous handmade wood box. It's beautiful. And he shares with us that in every Syrian home, there's this box. Every home has a box. And in the box is chocolates and cigarettes and whatever, just little knickknacks and things. But that was the only possession that he brought because it was home to him. So of course I was like, I'm dead. I'm crying, everything. Like I have all the feelings, right? And I'm sitting across from this man and I'm thinking, he's like 27, I'm 33. switch a couple details. I could be him or his wife. And how would I want people to be treating me if where I'm from, there are bombs dropping out of the sky every day, and people are being shot and killed, and everyone knows someone who's being killed? What would I hope that people would respond like? And so that was enough for me, that thought of like, if I was in an emergency, you know, it's like, think about if you just like get in a car accident.
Yeah.
You're like mad that the whole freeway didn't stop, right? You're like, I can't believe these people are still going to the doctor and driving to work.
Right.
And so this situation is obviously far more serious, and people are literally doing nothing. And so when I heard some of the statistics that Elias shared with me about that, you know, like more than 70% of Syrian refugees are under 18.
Wow. I don't think I realized that.
Majority are women and children. And so you think about what happens to a generation of people where the men are no longer. Where you think about it's only women and children. Like, what is going to happen? And so I just think about the Black community, of what has happened to the Black community with majority of Black men in prison. You know, this overwhelming number of Black men in prison. What has that done to children who don't have fathers? Like, it's just common sense, right? That's not going to work out well if someone doesn't step in, if someone doesn't pick up the slack. And so I reached out to the board here, and I was like, so we need to do something with the Syrian refugees. Like, we need to do something. And so I talked to Elias, and we agreed to do a screening of his film, which is something that we're trying to do every quarter, is pick a film that's breathtaking and important and current, to speak to an issue and get people to be charitable around this issue. And so we screened the 13th and had a panel discussion that was beautiful about that. And so we're doing a screening later this month. And then the other thing we're doing is a large-scale community dinner. And so one of the facts that Elias shared with me was that $30 can feed a family of 6 for a month in Lebanon. And so
That's crazy.
Like, that is Chipotle. That's Chipotle for you and your boo. Right?
Yeah, yeah.
For one meal. So that means we have $30. That's what that means. And we could feed a family of 6 for an entire month, and they won't die. Like, because that's the reality. Like, that's the level of urgency is without aid, people die. That is not acceptable. Especially when we have $30.
I'm like, and it's different than what you're talking about. This $30 is nothing when you think about these dinners that people have. They're usually like $250 a plate, and
it's like for rubber
plate.
Chicken,
right? And this is nothing.
It's $30, and you could like. So anyway, so Elias is trying to raise $100,000 to sustain a community of 800 people in Lebanon in the Bekaa Valley, and he goes every couple of months and just is like, he's an international volunteer and filmmaker, and he just goes and does whatever is necessary. He's made these documentaries in the process, and so you can witness what is happening. He's developed a blueprint of how to support this group of people for the next year on $100,000, which is like most of us in Los Angeles specifically, like $100,000, we're like, so that was rent and Taco Bell, right?
Yeah.
But we get to participate in people living.
And when is this dinner?
So the dinner is May 27th. And so we're going to do them quarterly, and we're going to invite every single person we know to come. And ticket sales will be about $60, and you're paying for your meal and sponsoring, meals for a Syrian family for the next month. And so we're inviting people to just step in and participate, because obviously most of us cannot go to Syria or go to Lebanon. Some of us don't even want to do that work. And so that's fine. But there is something you can do. And whatever you do will make a huge difference and a huge impact. And also just watching these films and seeing the people and realizing people are people are people.
I also think part of this... part of what the gift you're also giving here is a way to participate.
Yes.
Because I think I've heard this from many people with so much going on in the world.
It's overwhelming.
We don't know where to start.
No.
We don't know, and it feels overwhelming that is it one thing? Does that mean, if I just do one thing, is that really going to help? And I think you're offering an opportunity to actually get involved in an easier way.
Absolutely.
Where is the best place to find out more about like the dinners, as well as to find out more about you and your stories?
So to find out anything sister support related, sistersupport.org is the best way to go. We have an events and programming page on there. We have a contact page. You can see our space, all the things. You can send an email and it'll come directly to me. So for Sister Support, it's there. And there's also a donate button. So if you care about what we're doing, we would love your money for sure and your support. And if you have a skill set or a thing that you want to contribute, and it doesn't really matter where you are, we're trying to set up hubs around the country. And so if you're a person who's like, I want to curate events, great, let's talk about it. Like, I'm open to whatever needs to happen.
That's so good.
If you're a person who's interested in building and creating and innovating, you're my person.
Yeah.
So let's do this. And then for anything related specifically to me and my poetry, it's Natalie is Poetry, all spelled traditionally, natalieispoetry.com. And I have Instagram and, I have all the social media. Everything is Natalie is Poetry. So you can find there.
We'll add it all into the episode, the show notes, and
Perfect.
the website as well to point everybody to. I have to say, this has been awesome. This has been so good.
Thank you. Yeah, go to my website and watch videos, because then you'll like understand what we're talking about. You won't just be like, this girl thinks she's great.
Well, she's talking a lot, but
like some of the poems will give you the feels. That's all I'm saying. People cry, and I'm always shocked.
it's true. And I've watched them. Before I even sent you that email initially, when I heard about your name, and then I watched your stuff, and I thought, oh, okay, I need to talk to this woman. She's so cool. So absolutely. When we may even take one of those poems and stick it on the website too.
Awesome.
At least to get people a little more extra curious.
Yeah.
So this is awesome. Thanks again.
Thank you.
So what'd you think? Any new ideas? Are you going to try something new? I'm always left feeling great and have a ton of ideas after these conversations. The guests are totally energizing me. Speaking of being energized, did you guys know about my Awesome Finds newsletter? Each week I share creative spotlights, meaningful stories, and new ideas to spark your imagination. And the reason I'm really doing it, I just want to share the great stuff in the world that energizes me to energize you. So if you want to sign up or you want to find out more information about it, go to awesomefinds.info. That's AWESOMEFINDS.info. Okay, back to the show. If you want to share thoughts about the guest or how the show sparked a new idea, I'd love to hear about it. You can call me and leave me a message at 1-707-347-9312. Just include your name and a brief message, and you may even be featured on the next show. If you want to follow along with me and see behind the scenes fun and my adventures, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at @meChristopher. That's MECHRISTOPHER. You can also follow Accidental Information on Instagram and Facebook at Accidental Information, and on Twitter at Accidental Info. Also, we publish original articles weekly about following your passions, getting creative, and a lot more, all at accidentalinformation.com. Lastly, if you love the show and want to spread the goodness, go tell a friend about it. As in literally text someone or go email it to them. I'd love it. Also, make sure you subscribe to receive new episodes automatically each week. Thanks again for joining the conversation. Okay, that's it. We'll talk again next week.